Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight Latino Voices. I'm Joanna Hernandez. On the show tonight, we're just a few hours away from this election season's first presidential debate. We'll break down what to expect during the showdown between President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump. A new book looks at the intersection of education and culture. We meet the author and hear her story. And a public art exhibit uncovers the history of an ancient civilization in Mexico. And now to some of today's top stories. Taxes appear to be soaring for property owners in Cook County's south and southwest suburbs. Property taxes bills increased by nearly 20% this year, the largest rise in at least 30 years, according to a study from Cook County Treasurer's Maria Pape's office. The analysis found residents of the south and southwest suburbs of Cook County already have the highest tax rates, with the median property tax bill averaging $6,000. The second installment of the 2023 property tax bills will be available starting July 2nd and must be paid by August 1st. It's time for rainbow colors and a weekend of celebrations as Chicago gears up for the 53rd annual Chicago Pride Parade. The parade is a celebration of the Stonewall riots in the 1970s in New York City, a time when LGBTQ+ people faced discrimination. Chicago is known for hosting one of the largest parades, attracting thousands to the Lakeview neighborhood. This year, the parade will start 1 hour earlier than usual at 11 a.m. and will begin at a new location along Sheridan Road in Broadway. The parade marks the end of June's Pride Month. And Brookfield Zoo is looking for help naming one adorable female Mexican wolf pup. The pup was born at the zoo in April, and visitors can watch her enjoying playtime with her mother and siblings. How cute do they look? Voting starts today and will continue until July 2nd on their website. Some of the names proposed so far are Esperanza, Kelly, and Sierra. I think that Zoe also makes a good name for a wolf pup, don't you think? Well, up next, what can we expect at tonight's presidential debate? We have a preview right after this.
Chicago Tonight, Latino Voices, is made possible in part by the support of these donors.
President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump are set to go mano a mano tonight in Atlanta for the first presidential debate of the 2024 election. The debate will air live on CNN at 8 p.m. Chicago time and will feature new rules that include no opening statements, the muting of candidates' microphones when they are not speaking, no studio audience, no interactions between candidates and their campaign staff, including during commercial breaks, and no pre-written notes. Now, joining us now to break down the predictions for today's debate are Jose Sanchez Molina, a communications and political consultant and former deputy press secretary for Governor J.B. Pritzker's office. And joining us via Zoom is Geraldo Cavada, a history professor and director of the American Studies program at Northwestern University. He's also the author of the book, The Hispanic Republican, and a writer for The New Yorker. Thank you both for joining us. Now, let's start with this year's new debate rules. Jose, in the past few debates have gotten pretty heated, as we all know, with some audiences saying that they're resembling sporting events. How do you think the lack of a studio audience will affect both candidates?
Well, first, thank you for having me on. I think the lack of audience is really going to have to make the candidates focus on their messaging. The media landscape has really changed over the 4 years. I think what they're going to try to focus on is really get that 15 to 30 second clip that's going to go on TikTok, Instagram, or Twitter. Most people watch the debate over the next 48 hours across those social media sites. So I think that's what we're going to see.
Interesting how social media plays a big part. Right away you went to those clips. How so? Why so think of social media?
Well, you know, if you really think about it, I think everyday people, you know, they're probably going to get home. They'll tune in and out. But I think what really stands out, they're going to find trending across those websites. And now you have influencers that react as well. So I can't wait to see the funny reaction
what they have
videos.
To say.
Yeah.
Geraldo, I want to go to you. What about muted microphones? Do you think this will be an advantage to either candidate? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think it will certainly advantage, or it's intended to advantage Joe Biden for sure. I mean, he's the candidate who requested the muted microphones. And it kind of takes Donald Trump out of his more comfortable rally atmosphere where he's kind of vibing with the crowd, and he's going to have a much harder time doing that. And he tends to go on and on and on as well. I mean, his campaign speeches or like his rallies are maybe like an hour and a half uninterrupted speaking. So it's going to be hard for him to kind of contain himself within 2 minutes. And I think the muted microphones will ensure that that happens.
Is that what you're interested in watching? To see what their dynamics are and with no audience? Because as I just explained, some people had described it as a sporting event.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that it's going to be a much more, I think by design, a much more kind of muted format for them. I mean, not just literally in the muting of the microphones, but a much more staid atmosphere without the audience. Again, he can't like vibe with the audience there either. So I think, is that what I want to see? I mean, I suppose that the kind of heavy control that the network is putting on it by the request of the candidates could make it a little less exciting or boring even. But I do think that in terms of giving voters what they need to hear to begin to make a distinction between these two candidates, it's probably the best thing. I think we've been hearing, both Trump and Biden say what they need to say about each other in different formats for a long time. So I think it'll be important for voters to finally see them side by side hearing their messages.
And Jose, you have worked on several campaigns, including Governor J.B. Pritzker and City Clerk Ana Valencia. How important are debates in determining the outcome of elections, would you say?
Well, what I would say is that debates aren't necessarily the thing that makes or breaks whether a person is going to vote for a candidate, but it is an important part of telling a story. I think for Trump, what he really wants to focus in is attracting those voters that think that maybe he's a little too extremist. But I think the advantage goes to Joe Biden in that, people aren't really expecting much. So as long as he shows up energetic, really delivers on a message on why he deserves another 4 years, I think he'll really stand out as the winner of the debate.
Geraldo, what are your thoughts on that? What would you say Biden and Trump need to do today to win today's presidential debate?
Well, I think I go back and forth on the question of whether this debate is going to be very significant or insignificant. On the one hand, I think each candidate has his supporters. And as we know, kind of partisanship and loyalty to a party and to a candidate has increased over the past couple of decades. So, they both have their bases. At this point, it's as much about kind of energizing their bases as convincing the persuadable voters who are out there. So I think, this, though, on the other hand, I mean, in one sense, it's not going to move the needle much because both sides already have their supporters. But on the other hand, I think this is the first time in a long time, at least, probably since the last debates, where we've seen two men side by side. And in the interim, we've had, insurrections, we've had trials of a former president, we've had all of the questions surrounding Joe Biden's age and the State of the Union address where he kind of showed some of his vim and vigor. And so I think that both candidates need to stand there side by side with one another and help voters make the distinctions between them. And I think that can happen on immigration, it can happen on the climate, it can happen on approaches to the economy. I mean, I think Joe Biden can also rely on his status as the incumbent to talk about the things he's actually accomplished over the past 4 years. So I think it's really about side by side talking to the voters this time.
And you mentioned age. Jose, let's talk about age. Does age matter?
I think age matters in that, people want a leader that's energetic, that's ready to come out aggressively and fight for them. I really think about why a lot of Latinos, despite Trump saying very nasty things, his first campaign speech was saying nasty things about Mexicans, why I said that some Latinos are now gravitating towards him. And I think it's because at the end of the day, people are having to make very tough decisions. Are they going to be late on their card note? Are they going to skip groceries for a week to make rent? And I think what they really want is a leader that's going to come out and say, I'm going to fight for you, I'm going to make things better, and I'm going to provide relief while we're going through this very tough period.
Geraldo mentioned immigration, and Jose, you are a DACA recipient, actually. Mm-hmm. What do you think that the candidates can do to address immigration during the debate? Do you expect an emphasis on the working vote?
I sure hope so. As a DACA recipient, one of the things that I will always commend President Obama on is taking such aggressive action to protect and ensure that people like me can work, contribute. I have a career because of DACA. And that's what I want from both candidates. You know, I think Trump has done a good job of eliciting fear and trying to use that as a way to rally his base. Over the last month and a half, we saw President Biden take some action. But what I'm hearing from voters, what I'm hearing from other strategists is that more is needed to address the issue, not just for refugees and recent migrants, but for the migrants and immigrants that have been here for 5, 10, 15, 20 years.
And Hidalgo, talking about the Latino vote, what are some other issues that are important to Latino voters?
Well, it's always the economy. I mean, first and foremost, that's such a broad term, but I think what most Latinos mean by that is how they feel themselves to be doing. Do they have jobs? Do they think they earn a good wage? Do they feel like they are able to pay for their rent, for their mortgage, for their food, those sorts of things? And so, you know, when you hear Latinos talk about the economy, it encompasses a whole bunch of things that are all important. Beyond that, this year, I think immigration is really important. There have been a lot of interesting polls out lately showing how important the issue of immigration is to Latinos, and it cuts in different directions. I mean, they for sure want you know, stability and a pathway to citizenship, especially for long-term residents or the spouses of undocumented the undocumented spouses of American citizens to have their status regularized. But I think one thing that's shifting is they do also want border security. Things like, you know, the construction of a border wall are still really unpopular among Latinos, but they do want a kind of fair and ordered immigration system that seems to be out of control. So I think the economy and immigration this year are two really important issues. I think healthcare, education are always important too. And with healthcare, I think Biden actually has something to really run on there, where the uninsured rate among Latinos is dropped by half during his presidency. So I think what Biden needs to do is kind of run a little bit more as an incumbent and tout his accomplishments over the past 4 years, because I don't think many Latinos know about them. What's really interesting in surveys is that Latinos, when asked, can you name something that Joe Biden has done for you over the past 2 or 3 years, 70 or 80% say they can't name anything. And so I think the campaign is, over the next few months, going to have to make really clear what they've accomplished.
Jose, what are your thoughts on what he's saying?
I agree 100%. And, you know, across the world, I think incumbents are facing a tough time. But I think we have two great examples, both in Mexico and then here at home. You know, governor has great approval rating because he's delivered for people. And we saw the same thing with AMLO and his party. People turned out overwhelmingly for him because he increased the minimum wage, because he delivered for folks. And I think that's what's going on. People want someone that can deliver and offer a vision of what the next 4 years are going to look like.
And what about voters who are undecided? We know that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. didn't qualify for tonight's debate. How important is it to Trump and Biden not to lose votes to the independent party?
I think it's so important. I think it keeps going back to what I'm saying. I think a lot of people, what they are feeling is fear. They see their budget come under a lot of stress. They have to make difficult decisions. They look at their children and they say, is this what they're going to face? I have friends that are my age that have given up on ever owning a home, on ever starting a small business. So for a candidate, this is a great opportunity to come in and say, no, this is not the future that we're going to have. And I think the advantage goes to Joe Biden to, again, be able to tout what he's done. He's invested
Jose,
in...
I'm sorry, we're going to have to leave it at that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you both for your input. I appreciate it. And we're back with more Chicago Tonight Latino Voices right after this. Long before the ancient civilizations of the Aztecs or the Mayas, there were the Olmecs. Their people once lived along the southeast border of Mexico in what is now Veracruz, and are considered one of the most influential civilizations of Mesoamerica. Now a symbol of their legacy, the Olmec head is at the center of a public art project on display across the Chicagoland area.
The Olmec are the first civilization. This is la madre cultura, you know, because they're finding out, anthropologists in the know, they finding out that this civilization is kind of what inspired a lot of the Aztecs, the Mayans, everything around. After they started migrating from the areas that they did, and then they, the way we were found out about them was because of these gigantic stone heads. It's very important to understand that they found rubber, the cacao, corn. They gave us a lot of things that we start now to look into, and we say these are the things that we are just very common day for us.
So this project for me means quite a bit. It means a lot because it allows me to look back into the ancient cultures of Mexico, into my own culture growing up in Mexico, and kind of looking back at it, remembering some of the stories that I learned. My piece at the Olmec trails, looks at the idea of cycles of life, which, the paint drips, the paint flows. So to me, that's the aspect of rain. And rain is an aspect in the cycle of the earth, right? And all the ancient cultures looked at cycles. They were ruled, and they were, all about the cycles of the earth, the cycles of the moon, of the stars. They study those things. And that for me is an important part of my work. There's an actual line that you can follow around the head, which starts in the back of the head in the map of Mexico, and particularly in the region where the Olmec heads were found. And it ends at the top of the head in the frontal area, or the forehead, of the head, of the Olmec head. So the trail begins in the past and it ends with the present. One of the most important parts of the project that really attracted me was also that most of the artists, we were invited to go and work on site with other artists. And that enriched me as an artist, as I worked on my piece, being in community of others. And I think that was one of the important elements of the project, I feel, is that sense of community that was created, with the different groups that work together, some in Mexico, some here in the United States. And that was, I think, a really fascinating and exciting thing for us as artists, to remember, the conversations and the friendships that were made during that time.
It's a great entry point for the culture, the art, and even where it's placed. It's something important to somebody because, again, they've been traveling by there for a long time in their life, or maybe they're new to the place and they just saw it. Who knows? But it's always a great experience. So we try to find these little windows and find ways to kind of connect people. At the end of the day, we want them to learn about Mexico.
The exhibition will kick off this Sunday with the family fiesta at the Lakeside Pavilion in Glen Ellen. For more details on the entire project, please visit our website. And we're back with more right after this. For many of us, the journey to understanding your identity can be complex, and our next guest is no exception. She's now dedicated her life to teaching, breaking down educational disparities, and empowering students. She shares all this and more in her new book, Rabbit on the Moon, Embracing My Mexican-American Identity. And joining us now is the author, Elizabeth Alvarez. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for
It's such a pleasure to have you here. Now, I want to start. You've mentioned before that you became a teacher because you didn't want other students to go through what you went through. Can you tell me what school life was like?
Sure. So my elementary years were not very happy years. I started off wanting to really be like teacher's pet and shine. And as the years followed, it was more of my spirit being killed, teachers looking at me as different because I was Mexican in an all-white neighborhood, in an all-white school. And by the time you get to middle school, by that point, I felt like there was subtractive schooling happening to me. I didn't want to continue in my education, and felt like I didn't fit in anywhere in school and curriculum and anything.
And let's talk about the neighborhood you grew up in. You grew up with 3 siblings and you grew up in Marquette Park. Mm-hmm. How would you describe the neighborhood at that time growing up?
Well, I describe it in the book. It's the same place where Martin Luther King Jr. Actually went over there when there was a march with the KKK, and he got hit with a rock and fell to one knee, where he said, you have to come to Chicago to really understand racism and hatred. And so we moved in around 1974, and went to school during that time. My sisters actually went to school in the public school there. speaking Spanish, having difficulty because of an accent and being bullied because of that or shamed because of that. And so our parents sent us to a Catholic school thinking that that was going to be like a saving grace for us. And it was not, if anything. Yeah. And we could only feel our being Mexican again behind our Mexican door.
Would you say that impacted your identity? How was that like?
It actually confused my identity because you really wanted to fit into white society, and you wanted to understand, like, why don't I fit in? As a young girl, I was always thinking, like, why don't I have blonde hair? Why don't I have blue eyes? I want to look like the ones in the pictures.
You want to assimilate.
I wanted to assimilate. I wanted to be what they felt was Americans, an American per se, and I was confused. And then again, you come home and you're like, well, I'm Mexican and dark-skinned. I can't hide the shell that I'm in. You see me and right away.
Almost two different experiences.
Oh, 100%.
And I want to talk about your book. What was the passion behind writing it?
So I wanted really people to understand the journey of belonging. Belonging has been a core value of mine. And anytime in teaching, you can't be your most authentic, true self unless you belong and you feel like you belong. And that's where schooling comes in. Like, you really want to show caring, nurturing, understanding. Children want to be valued, seen, and then they can succeed. Yeah. And so this is where this came in.
And why call it Rabbit on the Moon?
I called it Rabbit on the Moon because back in 1995, I had some wonderful students. They came from Mexico, only spoke Spanish, and they taught me a folk story.
Which is this book that you brought?
This is this book, and it's called The Tale of Rabbit and Coyote. It's just about a sinister rabbit that teases the coyote, and it goes, the rabbit goes all the way to the moon, and I'll show you a quick picture of that there. And that is why the phases of the moon happen. And according to my students, that's how they learn the phases of the moon. And back then, I was thinking, that's not how you teach science. Storytelling is not for science. It's about concepts and ideas. And they taught me that storytelling really is about bridging.
So it was very intentional.
It was very intentional.
And you have chapters in your book named Pausing to Reflect on Challenges and Decisions and Letting Go of Burdens and Embracing the Transformation. People who read the book, what do you want them to feel while they're reading those chapters?
I really want them to just understand that we want acceptance, that being different doesn't mean that we shouldn't be allowed. Again, going back to belonging and nurturing, and overall that we're only human, and so we're unfinished, we're in progress, and so just really being compassionate and empathetic to one another.
Now, you said you've been a teacher for 13 years, but you have a long background in education. How would you say your experience has helped you guide students?
My experience overall is that I learned a lot from my children, my students. I mean, they are not empty vessels. And so allowing that to be open.
Actually, some
to
pictures
that.
of them
geez,
and you when you're younger. Yeah, I love that. Is that you dancing?
That's me dancing with my children. Oh, that's a little embarrassing. But yeah, and I have a wig on and
love
everything. But definitely, it's really that my children really made me understand teaching a little bit differently, and understand that even though I'm providing the teaching and they're learning, I too am getting something back. It's a reciprocal.
What would you say makes a good teacher?
A teacher that understands the whole child, a teacher that understands that everyone comes from different backgrounds and really brings to the lesson, that they have stories outside of the school that can really bridge what you're trying to teach as well. Children come in with so much already. I mean, they're on, the internet already. Right now we have generative AI, that they're getting all this stuff.
Yeah.
It is our job to make sure that they comprehend and understand and eventually get them to that productive struggle that we want them to get to.
And I want to talk a bit about your family. You've mentioned that your family didn't know that you and your siblings were going through such a hard time in school. Oh. And you mentioned your dad just read your book and got to hear and read some of your experiences. Mm-hmm. What would you say stood out to him the most?
Well, I haven't had a chance yet to talk to him. He did say to me that he was reading the book and that he was liking the book. My father can be pretty quiet about this kind of stuff.
Many Latino parents.
I was about to say, a Mexican man kind of holding on to his feelings or sometimes even repressing it. But definitely, I mean, my siblings and I, we knew schooling was our job, and we didn't really bother our parents about it. It was a cultural thing. We decided that. Like, we knew the difficulties we were going through, but they dealt with so much more. The migration here, trying to have 3 jobs, raising 4 children, just really trying to take care of us. And we didn't want to bother them with that.
Do you think students now, we have a couple seconds left, but do you think students now are in a different phase where they're able to experience or are able to really experience the belonging or able to talk about it instead of in a different phase where we had to kind of just stay more quiet?
I think in some schools, definitely yes, and I have seen them being around so many schools. I do think we still have a ways to go, definitely.
Well, thank you so much, Elizabeth. I'm looking forward to finishing the book.
Thank you so much.
Again, the book is called Rabbit on the Moon, Embracing My Mexican-American Identity. And that's our show tonight. Join us tomorrow night at 5:30 and 7 for the Weekend Review. Now, from all of us here at Chicago Tonight, Latino Voices, I'm Joanna Hernandez. Stay healthy, stay safe. Buenas noches. See you next time.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, which is proud to honor founder and senior partner Robert Clifford, who has been named in Forbes' 2024 list of America's top 200 lawyers.